Hello and welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here today, and we appreciate you making time and space to join us to learn a little bit more about the work that's happening in some of our partners' districts. So we're going to go ahead and get started with some introductions. And Andre, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andre Gray. I'm the superintendent here in Encinitas Union School District. We're a North San Diego school district, a K-6 with 9 schools, and I'm happy to be here with you today.
Great, thanks so much. All right, Corey, you're up.
I'm Corey Steiner. I am the superintendent for the Northern Cass School District. We are a pre-K through 12 district, about 730 learners, and we're located about 25 miles northwest of Fargo, North Dakota.
Awesome. Thanks so much. My name is Katina Hancock. I'm a partner here at Learner Centered Collaborative. I am joining you from Weatherford, Texas, about an hour west of Dallas. And I get to work with a variety of partners across the country doing this learner centered movement. And I'm excited for our two guests today to share more with you. We'd love if you would also take a minute and maybe introduce yourself in the chat. Who are you? Where are you joining from? Maybe what your role is. We'd love to welcome you while we get started. So here at Learner Centered Collaborative, we always like to start with our core beliefs, so our mission, vision, and values. And we really believe that it's imperative that we start to create education ecosystems where all learners know themselves, thrive in community, and actively engage in the world at their best selves. And we especially lean into our values of being trusted and responsible, curious and humble. We know this is courageous work and that we often have to tackle some barriers as we embark on this journey. So we try to rally the troops and really build these inclusive communities and then make sure that we measure and monitor along the way. So we lean into that impact driven. Welcome, Ryan, Tanya. Good to see you all. The strategy that we leverage is that we really want to start to create these interdependent networks where we can bring folks together from across the country and really build communities of practice that are sharing and learning in community. We also have our deep partnerships that we go out into the field and we work arm in arm, hand in hand with these folks to really make shifts that are relevant and impactful for their community. And then we also understand that we need to do some research and build some efficacy to not only provide tools and resources, but to monitor our collective impact on the systems that we support. And we really believe that when we start with learners, we start from a place of possibility. And this means that we put learners at the center. We have a phrase, centering learners by design. We have to get really clear about what we want for them and then move outwards in order to build this community. This is just a quick little scan of our partner network. And so you can see that we have a lot of touch points across the country. And it's part of that network strategy is making sure that we can connect these folks together to share about the work that they're doing and increase our kind of like our friction and our frequency of this movement. This is just to name a few, if we want to do a little name dropping, and you can see that Northern Cass and Encinitas are well represented here. We have quite a few district partners and a handful of state partnerships, as well as a few just single school partnerships that we work with. I'm going to do a quick little review of our approach, and then I'm going to turn it over to Corey and Andre to share about their work. So as I mentioned, we like to start with learners. So when we think about our ecosystem, we want to get really clear about our whole learner outcomes. From there, we design the learning model. Once we're clear about our outcomes, what we want learning to look like, we can then support schools to create their unique brands or their unique identities relative to those types of learning experiences. From there, we want to go out to the systems level and think about what the district needs to do in order to create the enabling conditions for this transformation to take shape. And then finally, we know that culture is imperative, and it doesn't matter what strategy we put into place. If we don't have a strong, trusting, positive culture, we're not going to get that change or impact that we're looking for. So here's just a couple examples of what our whole learner outcomes are. This is the knowledge, skills, dispositions that each community believes is necessary for kids to not only be successful in school, but in life and in career and as a citizen of our great world. The learning model is what we hope teaching and learning looks like in the classrooms and across the system. And it also allows us to be more intentional with how we design our professional development systems, how we have conversations about growth and evaluation. So when we have this level of clarity, the system can really align itself to these set teaching and learning experiences. School design, we want to really make sure that we are able to support our schools to intentionally design these learner-centered practices, things like distributive leadership, small learning communities, real-world learning, having a clear identity. We know that systems can have a unique brand. You know, this might be a STEM school, and this might be a design thinking school. So we want to create the space for schools to run with that. And then finally, our topic of today is the enabling conditions. So what needs to be in place such that we can develop the whole child and even our adult learners in the system. We want to make sure that we are treating the littles to the bigs in a really supportive fashion so that everybody is growing and evolving. So the enabling conditions, what we're going to talk about today is coherence, because in Encinitas, where Andre is, and even in Northern Cass, we're going to give two examples of how they were able to really think about this idea of clear and compelling alignment in their system so that everybody, their teachers, their families, their community knows the work that is happening there. So the elements of a framework that we're going to have Andre talk about in just a minute are, we start with vision, mission, and values, define the portrait of a learner, create the learning model, and then think about the blueprint. And we like to kind of think about these as the why. Why do we even exist as a system? The what, the how is the learning model, and then finally the what's next. How do we know we're going to move the system in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years such that we can realize the vision for the future, our aspirations for the future? So when we produce these for our communities, we have a level of clarity so that when we do have some ambiguity in the system, we can navigate that. We can be creative within some constraints that we know systems have, whether it's through policy or even past practice, and it supports that coherence. So Andre, I would love for you, I didn't pull up all parts of your framework, but would love for you just to spend a few minutes just sharing about your journey and how it's impacting your system.
Great. And I think Ashley can put a link to our whole strategic plan and our website in the chat for everyone as well. But I am thrilled to be able to talk about this process because it's been one of the most invigorating processes of my 33-year career because it's really reignited everything that we believe here in Encinitas and really kind of brought us together. And I think just starting from the beginning, we recognize that we have a lot of great things happening, a lot of innovative practices in our district, but we were yearning for some commonality in our work. There was a little too much ambiguity, and we wanted to capitalize on kind of coming out of the pandemic and recognizing that we had some fractures and needed greater trust in what we were doing and how do we bring people together around what matters, which is, you know, a common purpose and shared interest in learner outcomes. So we started in the spring of 2023, and really the work with Learner Centered is what has been the driving force to this, you know, the partnership and having somebody walking the walk with us from the very beginning. We started just as the vision and mission states in terms of, you know, with learners at the center. The very first things we started doing was student focus groups and instructional rounds, walkthroughs in classrooms, looking for what was already happening. And then we brought together our guiding coalition, and that essentially was bringing people from all parts of our community and organization together to think about what we wanted for our district. What would this look like in the best possible way, and what are we trying to accomplish? We had community members, teachers, you know, student voice, parents, all 9 of our principals, integral parts to this work. And then it became this kind of process, this accordion process of, brainstorming and getting, a vision on paper or multiple visions on paper, and then taking this to our larger community, lots of innovative ways where we had constant feedback and input, where our guiding coalition was able to come back on a regular basis, this feedback loop to refine and reflect and to determine, is this really what we mean? And through that process, that spring, we were able to create a vision, and we were able to create our learner profile. And it was very rewarding to hear consistently at the end of that school year that people put their stamp of approval. It didn't matter where you were before the pandemic or how long you've been with the district, but it was a very consistent message that, yes, this is what we want our learners to know and be able to do. And our learners are adult learners and student learners, and that we all have a stake in making that happen. So it was a great way to end a school year, but it was an even better way to start the year, where we were launching our learner profile at the beginning of 23-24, and bringing people together to be very clear about what we were anticipating and what we were hoping to do. And that year, our intent was just to get the language and have people really use the language of the vision and really understand the learner profile in terms of those 6 competencies that we were striving for all of our learners to have and be able to do. And through that process of the year, we worked on the strategic plan, what the big moves were going to be, what would our 3 to 5 year kind of blueprint look like? Because if this is what we believe we want students to know and be able to do, how are we going to get there? And with Learner Centered Collaborative, we were able to have this really systematic process for determining what those big moves would be, what the impact would be, what the success metrics would be. And then we were also able to share the bright spots. Really, that first year was all about the bright spots, recognizing where we were seeing this work happening, looking at our units of study and doing tuning protocols to look at how can we make sure we're layering on, not taking away some of the great things we were doing, but doing a better job of having clear language and consistency around it, and being very intentional about those competencies. And then speed along to this year, we spent the end of last year redefining or recreating our report card, because that was one of our big moves. And then we launched our new report card this year. And then we're working with our innovation cohort to really focus on competency-based instruction this year throughout next year. So that's kind of where we are in the journey in a nutshell.
I love that so much. And I just love the emphasis year after year on the community and those touch points and these feedback loops. And we're going to dig in more, and we'll have some opportunity for Andre to unpack some of her learnings from the journey. Corey has been in this space for quite a while as well, and we're going to kind of lean into this idea of accountability and kind of expanded views of success, which when we do get really clear about what we care about most, we have to measure it in a different way than just standardized test scores. So Corey, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about why scorecards have helped Northern Cass measure success more broadly, how you brought in community input, what was the metrics and evidence that gave you multiple dimensions of perspective around what was happening on your sites, and then helped focus your community.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've been in this work now for about 8 years. And I just want to give a little context so people understand why we made that shift, and then why all of a sudden after 8 years are we kind of changing the way we figure out whether we're doing this right or not. Ultimately, as a district, when we do graduation, we're still small enough where kids would be able to put their baby picture on the screen and everybody would go ooh and ah, and then they'd put their senior picture up and they'd say, I'm Johnny and I'm going to blank university. And I noticed one year when one of our learners said, I'm going to work on the family farm, you almost heard people exhale in disappointment. And for some reason, I couldn't get that thought out of my mind all summer. And I brought it up to a couple of my educators, and they said the same thing. It's how can we look at a learner who was in our system for 13 years, did everything we wanted to, was a valuable contributor in multiple different areas, and say that they were a failure when they're going out to do what all of us are going to do, and that's enter the world of work. And so we said, well, what if our motto was about choice ready, college, career, military, and ensuring every kid gets their first choice? And so we actually went out to our community early on, and we asked them, like, what are the skills? What do you want for your kid? And what no one said was the highest ACT score, valedictorian, want to go to an Ivy League school. What almost everybody said is, I want my kid to be a good friend, to be a good partner, to be a good parent, and just have a chance to decide what they want to do with their life and identify how they're successful. And we had to look at our parents and say, in our current traditional system, we're not going to be able to do that for your child. But if you trust us and you let us tear this down and start all over, and we build a system that's based on individual needs and we personalize that system, we can get to a really unique skill set. And that's our skill set identified in our portrait of a learner. I love the term profile. We don't call it a portrait of a graduate because we're all in one building. Everybody's accountable for our profile of a learner. So let's fast forward then 7-8 years of really amazing, wonderful work, celebrations, steps back, steps forward. And we were struggling, and our board was struggling with, how do we know this is working? We had a lot of qualitative data from a lot of different groups. We run tons of focus groups. We have learner advisory councils, community meetings, and it seemed to be working, but we were really afraid about what if it wasn't? What if the story was really strong, but what was making up the story wasn't quite accurate? And to be honest with you, we couldn't really figure out where to go until Learner-Centered Collaborative. We watched a webinar, and Katie Martin shared on the scorecard. Known Katie for many years and reached out and said, tell me more about this. And what I figured out was, this is a way to build something that is extremely personalized for your district to be able to tell you, are you doing the things you promised you would do for your learners and for your community? But never once in this process where we had educators, and I had educators who were brand new and had never taught in our district that joined, veteran educators, parents, leaders, board members, this whole group that came together. Never once were we told, this is what you need to put in there. We were really prompted to think, what do we value? And from this, what was really remarkable is, the longer you do a certain amount of work, I think it gets more complex and messy. And we were starting to get lost in the details. And what this work did for us is identify our 4 values. So the 4 values that you may see in the link or you see on the screen right now in bold, they were not our values as of 4 months ago. So we changed and said, what are impactful partnerships? So not only when we bring people into the school, but when we're partnering with someone like Learner-Centered Collaborative, are they getting something from us that's of value? So we want to make sure there's a give and take relationship. We talked about engaged learners. This is really around this idea of our seniors leaving our building with those portrait of a learner attributes, but all the steps along the way to ensure they're developing those skills and they're scaffolded from pre-K all the way to when they walk onto the stage for graduation. We focused a lot on empowered educators. It's no secret that getting teachers right now is really difficult for anyone, anywhere. So how do we build systems that empower our educators, but are still laser focused on being learner-centered? And then the last one, we can say it all we want. I know that nobody says, well, test scores are important, but hey, as long as the metric is out there and we're going to be assessed by it, then we need to have something on test scores. So we wanted to, but in this one, we really dug deep to even actually include IEP goals for learners that are often disadvantaged, to be able to let them demonstrate measures of success instead of off a traditional standardized assessment. And what I would say this is all done for us is, we brought this to our board and said, what do you think? And it was amazing. At our board retreat, they're like, these are our values. This is what we're going to go after. And we sat down and we dug into our strategic plan and we reformatted, revised our strategic plan. And now we have a crystal clear vision 8 years later. That's why I think this is so powerful. You're always constantly improving in these type of systems. Now, 8 years later, we have a different way to say, our system's strong. This is what we go after from here on out. So the scorecard, why does it matter? Because now everything on here, none of this is educator jargon. Everything on here is something our community can take in, our educators, even our learners can take in, because they've all had input and they all understand what's in there. That's the scorecard for us.
I love that so much. And this is going to be visible in a dashboard of sorts in a couple weeks, you said, right, on the website?
Yeah, so we're just finalizing. LCC is working on our dashboard, which we're going to release out very soon, and then we have our first data collection and data run. So I would say by the second week of November, it'll be on our website. And our goal was, when we shared it with parents, is we're going to be very transparent with how we're doing in the moment, and then throughout the year, and then as a summary. So we're trying just to be more open with our community, how things are going in the moment.
I love that so much. And I can't get the vision of the child out of my head that, you know, was going in to like run the farm. Had a very similar experience with my own son when he decided to go to junior college versus a 4-year college. And he didn't get a signing or a big party like, you know, some of the other athletes did. And, you know, it's really hard that we want to say that we value each individual child when our systems don't. So kudos to you. That's a really powerful story. We're going to dig into a few things. Corey and Andre and I met, and we just talked about kind of where they are in their journeys and some things that might be top of mind for folks as they've listened to these different stages of innovation and transformation in their systems. So gonna go with a couple questions, and then if you have other wonders that, you know, are kind of top of mind for you as you're listening, feel free to pop those in the chat, and we'll try to make sure that we address those as well. So first question, how did you know your system was ready for this type of work? And can you describe some of the conditions that you put into place?
I'll jump in and start. I think for us, the main thing was that we were ready when this was the only thing we could really focus on. Because I feel like we couldn't have it be one more thing at the time. It had to be the only thing, and we had to be able to make sure that every meeting, every communication, every aspect of what we're doing was somehow connected, so that there was a real interest in moving this forward. And we had a lot of great systems in place already in our district. So two-way communication systems, we have a triad system. And I know, like Corey mentioned, his student advisory system. We had a variety of different systems for a collaborative culture and problem solving together, as well as really tight communication systems. I do like things like superintendent chat. So we had a variety of systems in place that we knew if we were going to launch something that was really going to be implemented across the system, up and down and throughout, with every employee and our families being really connected to the work, then we were going to have to make sure we were really strategic and right from the beginning. The other part of an enabling condition is just making sure that we were really clear with the rationale. I think we had, a track record of success in our district, and you can oftentimes in situations like that have people like, why do we need to do this? We're doing great. Yet we all have a drive to do more for kids, and we were seeing the possibilities, and we had a lot of thoughts about what we wanted, but we weren't being able to have the same traction or momentum or action that we believed was needed for our students. And so part of it was making sure we were clear about the rationale about this is improving upon what's already great. This is taking what we're doing and thinking about how do we make it more learner-centered? How do we really talk the talk and walk the walk with what we have had as a founding principle for a really long time. And I think the communication systems are really important. Like culture and climate are so important. And part of that is having trusting relationships and communication, making sure we were communicating at the district level, the principal level, that everybody had really time to reflect on what we were doing and had time to champion the work, and then also to question the work when we were first starting out. So I think some of those conditions right from the beginning have allowed us to have some quick successes, which has really then kind of built that momentum along the way.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic. And I really resonate with the idea of like, if you were already successful, why change it? And I think what I try to tell people is the traditional system is not fail. It's actually doing exactly what it was designed for. The problem is the world has changed so dramatically, just even in the last few years, that we have to decide if that's the system kids deserve. And that was a commitment that I think both of us decided, like, kids deserve something different. And so a couple things that I think we had in place to help. Just one is we had a strong culture of commitment and not about consensus. And I'm a big believer consensus in schools sometimes can become a dirty word because I think it gives the impression that we can vote, and if 50% plus one don't like something, we won't do what's right for kids and we'll only do what's right for adults. And I don't think those have to be mutually exclusive. I think you can do what's right for kids and it can be good for your adults as well. So we had that culture of people committing to doing what's right for kids, that we didn't have a lot of convincing around that. The other thing is we had a lot of people that I call beta embracers. They were always living on what I always say the 2%. 98% of what they were doing was really great, but they're always working on 2%. They're always trying to do something a little bit different. They're the ones that when they see the thing on social media, they're like, I'm going to try that in my classroom. And we realized that we had enough of those that we would be able to create a model within the school that other people in our school could actually go see. And so instead of having to, and we were able to send, we were lucky enough to get a grant to send people throughout the country, but we were also able to go in and say, if you really want to see it being done really well, let's just go 2 classrooms down. And that became a really powerful moment because the others in the building started saying, well, I want to be that person. And so we got this critical mass of people doing the work because they embrace this idea of living in beta. And then the last one that it's not really fun or fantastic, but is our instruction was really good. And what I mean by that is we had been really clear about an instructional framework. We were able to assess and see that it was in place. And because that was really good, we felt we were able to make adjustments to that, to take those great strategies and make personalized learning strategies around that. But it took us multiple years to get to those points. But those were probably the 3 big things that we had in place that allowed us to feel we could go ahead and do the work and then transform the system.
Yeah, I love that. And I wonder if just a quick little follow-up, because we touched on the idea of kind of like standardized tests and that we are required, depending on which state you're in, to have these metrics. Are you finding that not only are your kids able to demonstrate sets of skills and dispositions that we know the world needs, they're also able to perform well or better on the standardized test scores, right? Like you didn't see a decline or an issue with them being able to show up and perform.
No, I would say a few things on that is if this your whole goal of this is to get better standardized test scores, you're going to fail. Like, and what I mean by that is if you're like, hey, we're at average right now, we want to just be above everything. That's not the outcome that this will create. However, I will tell you, our state scores have gone up now every single year, and we're well above state average because, again, it's good instruction, it's good teaching and learning, and it's engaging kids in controlling what they learn and how they learn it. So, I mean, our test scores have went up, but now we can also say they have this very unique set of skills when they walk out of the building that are transferable to no matter what they do. So, like, we've gotten the best of both worlds because we've stayed committed to the system.
And I would just mirror that, Corey, because I think one of the worries that some people had in the beginning of our work was that we weren't going to be focusing on academics, and that is so not true. It's actually the opposite. It's thinking about how do we approach academics and all of these other competencies as well. And for us, we're gaining greater clarity over those academic outcomes that we want for students, which is only improving our practice. And that was something that was a desired outcome for teachers because we had all different versions of what proficiency looked like. But when we start to be crystal clear around that, it actually helps all of us and improves everyone's outcomes. And when you're looking at personalized learning, you're really taking kids where they are and helping them succeed from there. So again, lots of ways to improve what we want for students, including academics.
I love that so much. All right, next question. So how did you lift up the communities? So both of you talked about bright spots and like really shining a light on practices that were impactful and were like moving the district forward. But what did you intentionally do throughout the process to make sure those were elevated for your communities?
All right, I'll start with that one. This is something I love, right? Everyone loves to share success stories, and there are so many opportunities to demonstrate in an organization what you value and what you hope to see, and recognizing the incredible work of the people on your team, as well as students. So we've been very intentional in thinking about how do we celebrate the work that's happening, and just really creative ways. Some of the things that we started from the beginning, we have a great tradition in our district of launching the year. We bring all 600 employees together. We have a farm, and we bring everybody together. We launch the district theme, and we have swag. Everybody loves free stuff. If you get free stuff, it's always a great thing. So we've done sweatshirts with our learner profile on it, and we've done T-shirts with our values. We have stickers, we have pins, like we do a lot of the branding, and it's a conversation piece too. If somebody has the word belonging on their back, it's a great way to talk about what does that mean for you. But then it's also been about how do we reshift what we think about awards assemblies and staff meetings and professional development, and even how my managers write their goals. So goal setting around our strategic plan has been a common thing. Well, when we're talking about goal setting, then we're also talking about progress towards that and shining a light on successes with that. In our district now, most of our student assemblies are student run, but they're highlighting students according to the learner profile, or in some of ours, it's even employees. So they're talking about confident collaborators, and they're recognizing our paraeducators in a particular program that are working together to improve student learning. So just highlighting and making sure that everyone is looking at that work. My biweekly communication, I do a every other week communication, and it's always focused not only as our vision and values, but there's always my message is connected, as well as we do a bright spot from a school every other week. And then our students are also now doing our board presentations rather than our principals doing board presentations, and then they're highlighting the learner profile and the work at their school sites. So not only just having opportunities to celebrate and share, but also having them talk about what are some of the promising practices. So all of our staff meetings at our school sites, they start with bright spots, like what have you done, in the last 2 weeks that has connected to the learner profile, or even in our work with our principals, they're in triads. And they do instructional rounds at each other's sites with one of our executive team members. And we just start with let's look for bright spots with our learner profile and also our learning models that we're hoping to see. And it's just a way for us to all be talking the same language and celebrating, like we're doing the work. This is what we were after, and now we're seeing it. And so we need to celebrate it. And when you focus on the good gets better quote that one of my mentors shared. So that's been a real success for us.
What would you add, Corey?
Well, one, that's amazing, absolutely amazing. That everybody just do that. A couple different things that I think that have lifted up the work. We've done days where we've actually had site visits where our parents come and our community members. We invite higher ed and legislators and let them come in. Our kids lead the tours, our kids lead the panels. They get a chance to talk to educators. They get to see the work. Right away, that was really terrifying. And people are like, please don't let them come in my room. And now we put this out when we have site visits, and members like, yeah, have them come in my room. We don't coach our learners on that other than like, here's how you give a good tour. Here's how you make good eye contact. But because we put such a focus on experiences in our district and connectedness on our district, they do just such a wonderful job. So the site visit has been a wonderful way to lift up the work. We have a couple really simple things that probably seem a little corny, but We have a theme around greatness in our district, and we really believe in handwritten notes. And so even at our board meeting now, we'll share out some people that have done great work, and our board will handwrite notes to educators. Our learners do it to educators. Our educators do it to one another. We do it to community members. And we've actually put it into our strategic plan as a metric of success about how many times we're sharing positive news with others or thanking people, putting out gratitude into the world. Our board a few years ago put a learner rep on the board because they felt like the voice of learners absolutely needed to be at the center of the decisions they make. And so when they're having discussions and they're making decisions now, they're thinking and talking and asking that learner for guidance. I think that's a really powerful thing. One small little thing we did is we changed terminology in our district. So we call students learners, which is simple, but we also made a purposeful effort to say any adult that works with our kids is an educator. And so when we have our big kickoff and back to school day, everybody goes around the room with the sentence stem and they would say, for example, I'm Corey Steiner, I'm an educator who works as a superintendent. You can't imagine the pride on people's faces when they understand that kids learn everywhere, so we're educating all the time, no matter where we're at. And what's ended up happening from that is I hear people in the community talking about our educators. I don't know if they're talking about the teachers, custodial, and that is a beautiful thing. I think that is probably when we knew that our system had got to the point where it will sustain itself because people believe in the terminology, because the terminology meant something beyond just the word. So those were a couple of the things. And I think probably the last thing I would lift up is we also make our senior capstone presentations, which is where they have to defend they've achieved those, they've acquired those portrait of a learner attributes and competencies. Those are public. And so we get tons of parents, obviously, that come, business members, community members. We have had legislators, we've had higher ed. The cool one, I think, is every single kid that goes to the military, their recruiter has come to those events. There's no better way to lift up what's going on in your district than let the kids tell their story, because all the kids do is they tell the story of how they've become a remarkable human being. So those are a couple ways for us.
I love that. And I love that you both have this belief in learners being part of the governance, right? And Andre, your kids go to 6th grade, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, right, like it's not, I think sometimes we often think, oh, a high school student can be part of the governance and engaging with the board. But it doesn't matter at the age, like if we give them the opportunity. And then I would also say,
if you want anything passed, you have students present it.
Absolutely, right?
Passionate students who want to make a difference every time.
Yeah. Well, and I would love to just double down on the idea that Corey shared about the term educator and bringing in classified folks. Oftentimes we think, oh, this is an academic journey or an academic focus. And it really does take every position in the organization working collaboratively together to move this forward. So that nuance of saying we are all educators in this system, regardless of the role or what seat we sit in, I think is really, really powerful. All righty, next question. So we know that this work is best done in community. Education can be kind of a siloed place as it is. So when we are looking at these big shifts, would love to know just who do you rely on currently, and maybe in the process too, like who did you really leverage the most as you were moving into this space that you're in now?
Corey, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do that. So I mean, there's all kinds of groups out there, and I'm gonna like throw a bunch at you, and then I'll talk kind of specifically. I mean, not just because we're on here, but LCC has played a huge role with us, not only just with the scorecard, but also we had groups go through in their first cohort of leaders and learners. It was fantastic for our people. We had a chance to make connections to other organizations. We worked in our state as part of a statewide grant through the Bush Foundation with KnowledgeWorks, who helped lift up this work in 4 of our districts in the state, and even including our Youth Correctional Center for Adjudicated Youth, which I thought was really amazing. They actually could come back out of placement and not be behind, which was part of the reason that they were even there. So I love that. We work with Transcend Education, Next Gen Learning, Two Revolutions, who's doing some amazing work in the state of Wyoming right now, lifting up this to over 50% of the districts. They also now are doing work in North Dakota. I mean, all these groups are willing to sit at the table with you. And here's the part I love about them, and this is important, is I don't ever hear any one of them, because we've worked with all of them closely, ever say that they're better than the other one. They all come to you and say, how do we best lift up a system that's best for your kids? And they'll find a way to work with you. So it's not an idea of competition, it's an idea of collaboration, which I love. And then I would say two other ones. If you have an antagonistic relationship with your Department of Education, find a way to turn that around. One of our great partners in this work has been our Department of Public Instruction, which is that term in North Dakota. When we're trying to think of something, if we're thinking of legislation or we're trying to do something, I have Ann Ellefson, who I call up the department and say, I need just an hour to brainstorm with you. We're thinking about some ideas. I don't ever believe there's anything we can't achieve or any barrier we can't get by, because we have that great working relationship. And then I'll throw out kind of a strange one. Find the school districts out there that want to share their story and dig in with them. One of our great partners the first 5 years was Lindsay Unified School District outside of Fresno. They had been doing this work for a long time. I think they're probably 15, 18 years into it. We went there on a visit, had about a 5-minute conversation. They asked if we'd help write a grant with them. We did it. And now we had this partnership where our kids were talking to Lindsay kids, our teachers were going down, they were coming up. And it became this partnership of two places that look identically opposite. We couldn't be further from who we serve and where we're at. And now they become this lifelong partner of ours in this work. So I think the people that are doing this work are in it for kids, so they will be in it to help you, because they know that it is a moral imperative to get this done.
Oh, it's hard to go second. Yes to everything he mentioned. We have some unique opportunities here in our region, that I think if you saw the map of the partnerships with Learner-Centered Collaborative in the beginning, you saw a lot of red in Southern California. So I feel very fortunate that I get to work around other districts who are maybe a few more years into the journey than we are, or are just starting as well. And so we have a few different networks that we get together. I actually have one tomorrow. And we this year, we're really looking at learner-centered and how do we lift this as a region. And we visit school sites, we walk classrooms. This last, about a month ago, I realized as we exited one of the classrooms, it was the first time that I had done instructional rounds, so to speak, with other superintendents to talk about instruction. Oftentimes as superintendents, we talk about a lot of other things, but to walk into a classroom and then to step out of the classroom and talk about what we saw in terms of instruction was just fascinating. And so there's a lot of learning that happens in systematic networks that you have an opportunity to do. And I look at it as every one of those is a real privilege for me to be a part of, that I get to learn from others. We also have a really strong university partnership with UCSD in a variety of different ways. One that's most important to this work is there's a research project that two researchers have been working on to look at culture and climate and a sense of belonging, which are really important to us. And is actually one of our values is belonging. And so they have been doing twice yearly surveys with all of our employees, and then following up with qualitative work and interviews. And so then they provide reports and affirmative inquiry opportunities for us, so that we're looking at that, data from a research perspective, and trying to quantify, our progress, and also how are we in terms of readiness for change? How is our leadership capacity in this work? And so that has been really helpful. And then I look at it in terms of there's so many smaller communities that everybody in our organization is a part of. So for example, our teachers collaborative communities within their grade level teams, and we have release time for that. But then we have also over the last 2 years released the entire grade level across the district. So all 9 sites, everybody from 5th grade comes comes together and they're doing this work together. And then I mentioned our principal triads, which those are once a month, where they're talking about problems of practice. They're talking about their areas and then of need. And then they're also walking classrooms to talk about what they see. And a big focus on that is feedback. And so they craft feedback together, they analyze feedback, they do coaching conversations for each other where they watch other principals do coaching conversations with teachers and then they provide feedback. So trying to improve everybody's capacity and practice, but also it's more of a support model when you're in a community. You have other people that it's not about only shining a light on what's bright, but like, what are you struggling with? What are some of the hard parts? An example of that for us right now is report cards. Grading practices are tough to tackle. And if we were trying to do any of that alone, it would be a very lonely, ugly place to be. But when you're talking about and you're reaching out to other districts that have done this before, and you're looking at the work of so many other places across the nation, and you're learning from their best practices or their words of wisdom, it's really helpful. So I feel so fortunate that with technology and everything else, there's no lack of other people to reach out to and learn from. It can be stressed with time, but things like this where webinars, like what is that one thing that we're struggling with? I assure you there's a webinar, probably through Learner Centered, that you can find that can tackle that next step, or they can connect you. So just knowing people to connect you as well has been really helpful. So I've definitely felt supported all along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you shared a variety of different like tiers of community, right? It could be a partner, it could be a triad, it could be a collaborative, it could be a big external partner. But there are a lot of them out there that people can tap. All right, we're coming up, getting close to time. We have one more just quick question before we start to wrap up. We likely have folks on here that have been interested in trying to do this work for a long time and just haven't found the right inspiration or the right next step. If you could give one piece of advice for somebody that really wants to start tackling some of these big things that you all have done, what would you say? What's the starting point? What's a good starting point?
Yeah, obviously every district is going to be different depending on where they're at, just in terms of the conditions they have in place, kind of like we shared earlier. I think for us, and this sometimes isn't maybe popular, I think you're going to have to decide whether you're going to tinker or you're going to transform. Like you have to have that conversation, because if you're going to tinker, that's about reforming. That's going to be pieces of the system. And typically when people are doing that, it will revert back to what's comfortable. So one of the things we did is we committed to a system tear down and a system rebuild. So we committed to transformation. You can hear Andre say it, like they're doing a whole transformation. She talked about there's reforms within the transformation, like they're doing it beautifully. But I think you have to decide, and you have to be honest with people, that this is going to be exceptionally hard work. It will be the most fulfilling work you will ever do in your life. But it will be hard. It'll harder than you've ever worked. And I'll even say, like, one of the things we found out is we had some struggles midway through this work. And so we gathered people's biggest fears, and then we put them on a big wall and we tried to categorize them, and we just couldn't land on what was going on. And so we actually sent them to one of our therapists who worked in our district. And they said, "Oh, who died?" And we're like, "What?" And they go, "You have people going through grief. They lost something." And that was like the point we realized, like, we had to treat this as there's going to be some loss because people are doing amazing things. Let's not look at them as losing those things, but we are just going to make sure that every kid gets those great things all day long. So for me, it was, we committed to transformation from day one.
I agree with that. I love that phrase. I think Marlon put it in the chat. And for us, it was part of it was making sure we had the right partner. 5 years ago, as a new superintendent, like I knew that this work was on the cusp and that we needed to start. And yet I was waiting, I don't know, waiting around. That doesn't sound very highly of me, but I was just kind of waiting for that moment where because part of me was like, well, I should be leading this work, or how are we going to do this work? And it was a light bulb moment when Devin Vidichka was in our district working with some of our teachers who were with a Love of Learning group. And he was talking about the work that they were doing. And I was like, well, of course that would be the partner. Like, there's my partner, because I knew that it wasn't a one size all approach, because here we are talking about personalized learning. I wanted it to be very personalized to our district. I also wanted, people who are doing this work nationally. And I wanted somebody who was going to be a partner, who was going to be a thought partner, who was going to push, who was going to help us be in this work long term. And what I have to say is so many people, those of us who've been in this career for many years, you've seen strategic plans, or you've seen portraits of learners, and their posters, or their things that are displayed somewhere. And I am very proud that, every single board meeting that we have, one of my board members will say, like, I can't believe, like, we're doing it. We're like, it's actually living, and it truly is living. And it is a long process. So I think that is a piece of advice as well, is that you need to be in this for the long term, because we are truly changing our educational system to meet the needs of students. And so it's not fast, but I agree with Corey. It is so rewarding to see how those changes are taking place. And more importantly for me, I see how our educators are so much more comfortable with this work, and how our students are sharing about, their own learning, and they're, now a part of their report card process, and they're now talking, and our parents now understand how their student voice is being elevated in all of the work. And now it's actually students being the ones to say, well, where's our voice in this? Because that's just the habit of that we've wanted to be in. So I do think some of those are really important, but I would have to say for us, it was really having the right partner. And it's really helped, kind of allowed me to be a participant. And I'm just a side-by-side learner. I am in the innovation cohort. I'm in the guiding coalition. I'm sitting next to a paraeducator and a parent, and we're walking the walk together. And that's what an outside partner that has the same values that you have can do.
I love that. Yeah, Corey, I think we're probably going to find your quote on a slide somewhere in some of our next workshops. Like, we're going to tag you in it. Yeah, and I think I just really appreciate you both emphasizing that this is about a journey, not about a problem and a solution, which all too often is how we've approached things in education. So really doubling down that this is a marathon that we're in, not a quick sprint. Great. Well, I wish we could keep talking, because I'm sure you have tons more wisdom to share, but we're going to pause for just a second and see if some of our guests have a little bit of a chance to reflect on what has been shared today. So we'd just love in the chat, if you would like to pick one of these two prompts, either what resonates with you about what you've learned or heard today, or where do you maybe see an opportunity to improve coherence in your system based on some of the ideas that were shared. So we'll pause for just a second, and then we're going to wrap up. So if you don't have your chat open, grab that chat button. All right, well, keep those reflections coming. I just wanted to give one small last opportunity for any closing thoughts from y'all. We know that you are both very, very busy. It's fall. It means like progress reports and parent conferences and all the things happening in the fall. So thank you so much for being here today. Any just final words of wisdom before we wrap up officially?
I just kind of think it's the hardest work you'll ever love kind of thing, because you really do get to see transformation happening. So I'm proud to be able to be a part of that and sharing the bright spots. And I love listening to other people's bright spots. It inspires me to think about what I want to do next as well. So I appreciate being on here with Corey.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, I have so many different things now. I'm like, okay, we need to do that. We've got to start thinking about it this way. So, yeah, I just appreciative of the people joining today, and the people that are putting learners at the center and doing it with a focus on them developing skills and not just content, understanding that we're responsible to build the next great society based on kindness, compassion, and empathy. And we have the greatest generation of learners ever sitting in front of us. So let's take advantage of that. So thanks to everybody who's doing this work.
I love that. I'm sensing maybe we need to do some type of like visit, you know. Corey, you can come down to Southern California and we'll come up to Northern Cass and do some explorations.
Yeah, as long as I get to come in January and you don't want to come then in North Dakota. So fair.
True. You picked the best season for us to go to North Dakota and we'll come. Awesome. So today, you know, we were focusing on the enabling conditions, what the system needs to do to really promote this idea of coherence. We have a lot of tools and resources available on our website. If you're just interested in continuing to explore and want to make sure that, you know, you have different artifacts that you can leverage, take a peek at that. And then we love to stay in touch. So if you want to follow Andre and Corey, we've got their social handles here. If you have any additional questions for us, feel free to reach out. And if you just need some thought partnership, we're here. Reach out and let's connect. Appreciate you both again so much for taking the time today. Hope the rest of your week goes well, and we'll catch you next time.